We're going to call this workshop together.
Come on, Alan. You'll leave that.
Apparently, the microphone has been recalibrated, and I may be a little louder than I used to be.
Go get them, Alan.
I encourage everyone who has a microphone to use it. Again, as I was just discussing, there have been some citizen complaints that have not been able to hear us out in the audience.
It's probably good.
It probably is good, Jerry. We have Miss Brittany Birkin with us, and I'll pass the floor over to her in just a second, and she'll be doing a presentation talking about Children's Services Councils. This is a workshop that I've asked to put together. This is something that's being done in several communities around. Has been going on in several counties around the state for a couple decades, and that Leon County and some of the work I was doing up there has talked about doing. And then some of the citizens down here have talked a little bit about. And mainly I just wanted to sort of raise awareness about what Children's Services Councils are, how they work, what they do, who runs them, and how, if the county decided to try and move forward with it, how those resources could be used in the community if we decided to do something like that. Also, what I'm hoping comes out of this conversation a little bit is something I know that a lot of things that frustrate us in just general, and a lot of the community members in Wakulla County, is the lack of resources and activities for children's youth programming in Wakulla County. And it's an ongoing challenge that our community has faced. Those of us who grew up here our entire lives. I mean, as you raise your children here, they're still having issues trying to find things to do outside of school sports. On that note, I'm going to ask Miss Birkin if you'll come up to the microphone, and feel free to adjust it to your comfort level and spacing for your pitch, and look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I am the CEO of the Florida Children's Council, and I represent 8 counties currently that have Children's Services Councils locally, and am in Tallahassee and work in their office. By way of background, I think it might help as you all are thinking through the Children's Service Council model to know why this was something that was very interesting to me. My background in the last 5 years was working in state government, and actually was the director of early learning for the state. And one of the challenges that I'm sure you all will appreciate was, how do we continue to prioritize local needs and allow communities to have the flexibility to meet their needs? So the state organization, one of the major tasks we have is that I work on behalf of the 8 counties to make sure that any state policies are set, do not compromise local governments and their abilities to make decisions for children and youth and families in particular. In the 8 counties, you'll have in your packet that I presented to you, there's actually a map so that you can see. One of the things that you'll notice is Leon County is in blue, as Chairman Brock indicated. We are not yet, though, a county that actually has a CSC, as much as we've had discussion about it in Leon County. So the Panhandle is woefully underrepresented at this time. But between these 8 counties, because of the 8 counties, we serve more than 50% of Florida's most at-risk children and provide services, and that I'll speak to the different programs and services and the flexibility that's set up. But that's made for a profound impact on our ability to work in Tallahassee and have a presence and be able to communicate what's most effective. The directors that I represent often liken themselves to petri dishes. They have additional funds for community services that don't have the strings and barriers that are often associated from other funding sources like state and federal government. So they're really able to use those dollars most flexibly to meet the needs of their community.
And I apologize real quick. There are additional counties to these that have Children's Services Councils?
That's a very good question. What there are is there are other counties, and we're updating our map right now, that have dedicated fund services, but they are not considering themselves at this time a formal Children's Services Council. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to identify on the map some of the other counties like Charlotte that still have funds, but they haven't set up and organized, and they don't consider themselves, they don't follow the governing statute, but nor do they get the benefits of being a Children's Services Council.
And some of I think Okeechobee or Highlands also, right?
Correct.
Just because they're rural like us. I know a lot of the counties on here are urban.
That's what I was going to say. It looks like most of them are.
Yeah, but there are
Jacksonville, Tampa.
Rural communities that do it also.
And we do have 2 smaller, Martin and St. Lucie, that are they're strong partners, and yet they are smaller. They are more rural, and they're set up in nature, and I can speak to some of the things that they've been able to do with their dollars locally. So first, just by way of explaining the types of organizations, there are 7 of these counties were set up by voter referendum. And tax dollars from the referendum then are moved towards children's issues. The community uses these dollars to first create, and I saw that you all in your packet you received before, received the materials on the ability to have a group that does a thorough needs assessment so that you can do gap analysis of where are investments being made, what resources currently do you have that benefit children and families, and where could there be additional funds, and direct any dollars set aside for the Children's Services Council to those funds. Depending on how you set it up, I know, for example, in Leon County that we calculated that it would be $12 million if they set it up based on the tax property values currently, and so that's, it costs families very little, about $24 a year is what we're talking about, and yet Leon would generate $12 million by doing that. The average, as our folks have said generally when they've worked on these issues, is you're talking about 2 large pizzas a year. And for the price of 2 large pizzas a year, what they're able to do in their communities is pretty significant. So those are the independent models. The dependent models are, right now we have Jacksonville as the best example, where the county has said, we're just going to set aside money. It's not necessarily based on the ad valorem taxes, but it's money that's already within their community that they have elected to set aside for children's issues. And so that's considered a dependent, because year to year it can be changed, and it's not formalized in law, and it's not something that was formally voted on by the citizens of the community. You can see with the governing board or the recommendation, there is statute. If you do decide that this is something that works for Wakulla County and you move forward, there is prescriptive statute, which I also included in your packets. Really speaks more to the governing board and less to the ability of how you can direct those funds and use those funds. One of the things that we have prided ourselves on, though, is as a state organization working that all of the dollars are attached to outcome goals that are measurable, that we're accountable for these funds, that we're able to track the impact of the children and families that we serve, so that you can demonstrate to your community, this is what we've done with these funds, and this is why these funds are so necessary and important. As you indicated an interest in school-age care, we have a variety of different programs and services that we can help support you if this is the direction that you move in identifying how you would fund activities, what you might select. We have Palm Beach County, for example, really focuses a lot on early childhood development. And then we have Broward County that works on deeper end services, and they're more into the adolescent focus. You all being interested in what it sounds like is after school and school activities is certainly something in alignment, and there are programs and services that can be provided that are already created and already have the results-based accountability and the outcomes set up that you all might consider for funding.
Can you use this for capital expenditures or only operating?
You can use it for capital expenditures as well.
You build a building, fix up the recreation, whatever it's called.
Community center.
Community center, there you go.
Yes.
And you could use it to staff. You could use the money for staff at the community center also.
Correct. It's all how it's established in your referendum.
You could build a basketball court, you could, whatever.
Yes, and then turn and fund scholarships or pay the teachers, or it would be something that you all could determine and set up. And if you move forward with the referendum, how you put it on the ballot would say that you can
build a swimming pool maybe. But this would show up on people's tax bills just like the Water Management District does. It's fractional, millage rate, whatever.
Correct.
Every $1,000. Yeah, that's be $500,000. But
Up to $500,000.
Mm-hmm. Up to.
I thought it said you could do it to $1 million on there.
It goes. I think Hillsborough County's done $1 million, but the state allows for up to $500,000.
And this would, voter referendum would be the only one I would even think about this. But they could decide, and it would have nothing to do with us. It'd probably actually take money that we would normally be spending on something, which we don't spend, just not getting done. Decide whether or not they want to do it.
And I know, another question. The local Children's Service Council Governing Board, they're the ones who'd actually set the millage rate, right? It wouldn't be an automatic half mil. That board would have to decide up to half a mil how much to charge.
Correct.
How often do they make that decision? Is it an annual decision?
Annual. Mm-hmm.
Public meetings, I assume, in the sunshine.
Correct.
Citizens who go complain to them at their meetings, right?
Yes.
And if you notice the composition again, the 5 members, one would be school superintendent, local school board member,
Yeah, so, yeah.
and then 5 people appointed by the governor. So it really takes all of this out of, it wouldn't be in our hands, really.
But would we, how does the governor make his or her choice? Would we be able to nominate people to the governor, or?
Yes, in fact, that's a great question. You can set it up, it depends on how you want to set it up in voter referendum, but most of the counties that have Children's Services Councils, the recommendations must come from the county commissioners to the governor for consideration. He would pick out of the pool that you would put forward, and then that's how the board would be established.
Thank you.
But this board independently decides the best way to spend this tax money. The board has nothing to do with it at all. They could decide to spend it on one thing, I guess. But they're accountable to the citizens, I guess.
But you can set parameters in the ordinance on what the money can be used for.
Correct.
The ordinance that you would use to create them would be sort of their charter.
I think Alan's trying to tell you something.
The ordinance that you would adopt to create this district, if you used the 125 process, would be, you could set the parameters for how the money could be utilized within limits of the statute, but you could make that more narrow.
And how is this accountable to the citizens? I guess obviously the members aren't voted in. If they're not happy with the direction it's going, what do? If this board or a different board is not happy, saying, hey, we don't want you spending all the money on a swimming pool, we think you should be building a basketball court. How
Funding early childhood daycare or something.
whatever, just to say they're not happy.
Right. Well, and again, that depends on how you set up the process, but really if you require that this group tie it to a needs assessment so that they can demonstrate, here's a need in our community, therefore these are the dollars we're going to allocate to meet the need, and that it's a decision where you would have staff who can help implement, but the board and who you appoint on the board would ultimately be the ones to guide and make that decision. The public would be able to give input at the public meetings. One of the ways you can set up and make sure it's satisfied, which Miami-Dade did, they were the last to join formally the CSCs, and they set up a 5-year re-referendum. So they went twice, and basically it was pretty amazing. The first time they passed with about a 64% voter approval rate, and when they went up for reauthorization just last year, it was 86% of the voters said yes, absolutely, we see the benefits. So you can sunset it yourself and set it up that way if you want to, so that your community would have the ability to say, this is awesome, or it was a nice run, but it didn't really work for us.
We could stipulate how much of this funding went to overhead, for example, because I can see people getting mad if this generated $80,000 a year and $60,000 of that went to salaries for employees. That would be a dead starter. I guess we could stipulate how much can be used for overhead.
You could.
And you have to, and then you still have to figure out how you stipulate. I mean, that's a long conversation, but let's say the committee, what they decide they want to do is invest in the organizations that already exist. Like they want to give
To United Way, whatever.
Give to United Way, give to IFAS for 4-H. We want to see more of 4-H. So that if we paid all the membership fees for 4-H and we paid all the membership fees for football at the rec park so more kids can play football, and we paid for a bus to get them there, a lot of that's all overhead.
Salaries is what I meant.
Okay.
And it's a very good question, and if I can point out, most RCSCs typically do exactly what you're saying. They do not fund direct services. They don't provide the direct services themselves. Rather, they work with existing entities within communities and things that the communities just don't have full funding to do so that they can accomplish. And so it may be a contract with the Boys and Girls Club to say, now we want you to come in, we want you to staff this, and we're going to provide the scholarships, but we're not going to necessarily stand it up ourselves. As to your questions on admin, certainly you can set up caps to say 5% admin cap, 10% on non-direct, whatever it would be that the community would think was fair and viable use.
The Y, for example, which we're talking about coming out here, couldn't make their numbers work, to break even, and they're 10,000 short. You guys could step in and pay that difference instead of it having to come, right?
Correct.
Just, you know what I'm saying? That's what I could see as being a real advantage. You could leverage.
You can interrupt that.
No, this is really what I think is most helpful, is to have the dialogue.
Do most of these
Appreciate it.
the governing boards have a paid staff member, or does the county provide staffing?
It varies. In Jacksonville, where it is a dependent, so it's dependent on the government, the county does provide the staffing. In all the others, it comes out of their funding. And for our smaller communities, for example, St. Lucie County has 7 staff. So it's a very modest amount. Could be less for Wakulla based on...
Well, and something to be aware of, Jim, my estimate, if we went if this board was approved and it was a $500,000 in Wakulla County, that'd bring in about $500,000 right now. It'd bring in about $500,000 for us. So we wouldn't have...
So it'd be one staff.
It'd probably be one
One
staff.
and a half or...
1.5,
Right.
yeah.
And the governing board, those are unpaid.
Correct. Those would be volunteers.
Doesn't have to be now. But it would never be.
Other questions, or I can continue to talk a little bit about some of the specific priorities. I want to make this what you all want. If you want to move forward with it, we can also connect you with one of our smaller communities that has a Children's Services Council, if you think that would be helpful to hear their process and their story of how they've come to be and what they spend on currently.
Well, a couple things. The money can't be spent directly to the school system, correct? That's one of the provisions of how you can't spend the money. So you can't give it directly to the school system. You can hire teachers after hours to run programs, to do tutoring and things with the money, but you can't give the school extra money to do extracurricular activities even, correct?
Correct. And one of the benefits that the communities have really found is when it comes to collaboration and working together, that we really end up being the lead conveners, because it is a funding source that's pre-identified and it's an entity that gives funds. There's no typical, we don't have a dog in the fight of the turfism that can exist among other community partners. And so they become a natural strategic planner and leader for bringing community partners together and saying, we need to figure out how to work more efficiently and effectively. You all are both doing duplicative activities. We have limited funds as a community. Let's figure out how we can partner, collaborate, and get better maximization of the resources that we do have. And so most of the Children's Services Councils have actually been the one to create a community plan for children and youth well-being that everybody maps out and ends up following. And so it's been a really powerful process in these 8 counties of not just moving forward whatever initiative the CSC or initiatives the CSC prioritizes, but also the entire community in the nonprofits that do a lot of the work in each community.
I would find it helpful to hear more about what are some of the parameters different counties have put on it. What are the programs, like the diversity of programs that are funded, and also what else is prohibited besides contributing to schools.
And as she starts to go into that, the big thing to keep in mind is, as they point out, a lot of the counties doing this right now are urban and have a lot more resources than we would have. So the diversity of programs they offer are going to be much more extensive than what we'd be able to do in Wakulla County.
Well, maybe you could give us some examples from some of these rural counties you're telling us that are not on the map.
Certainly. The question on prohibitions is there's really not many restrictions other than reinvesting in the public school system and not duplicating those dollars. It can be set up based on how your community sees fit and how you set up the referendum and move it forward. On the programs and activities, there is a huge variety. It's all prevention and early intervention is really the premise. So it's all to avoid later, more costly, deep-end dollars that, taking families off of the reliance of government. So different communities approach that different ways, though. Some work on early learning and huge investments in making sure that families have scholarships so that families can go to work and afford to put their child in a quality child care setting. some communities choose to invest in healthy families and making sure that every person in the family, or every person who has a child, gets a visit at home, which greatly has been linked to reducing child abuse. And that is one that St. Lucie, you asked about, one of our smaller communities. They have set it up so that literally every family, when they get home from the hospital, they get a visit in the hospital from a nurse, mental health nurse, and then they get a visit at home, follow up, and they get the resources that they need to help with becoming a new mother and how they do that. A lot of them work on making sure that juvenile justice programs have the dollars that they need so that we are not putting children in detention centers, but really figuring out, can we, move costs to, like you're talking about, after school programs that help keep children off the streets and make sure that we're not putting them out in the neighborhoods where crime is going to happen. Some do a lot of intensive enhancements for schools, so after school program, making sure that they're not just in an after-school setting, but that it really is an enrichment program that we know will expand their learning, especially for our low-income children who need extra supports with their schools. So there's a huge variety, funding health insurance to, all the kid care, doing the promotion for that, to Miami-Dade has done a huge launch, which is very exciting, on a book club so that every child gets a book a month once they hit kindergarten to third grade, working on reading by third grade, knowing that that's critical to the children's later success. So that's one of the things that they've initiated that we're actually starting to replicate in all of the counties, and I'm working on how we can support it. That's the other purpose, just so you know, of having the state office is what you inherit immediately as your county is the access to information of what all 8 counties are doing and what makes sense for you to not have to do individually. I am in Tallahassee to help share the information and make sure that if you want to do outreach on reading by third grade, that we can produce the video in Tallahassee and not make each county absorb those costs. So there's another gained benefit of the dollars that come to Tallahassee that we're able to really maximize the resources. So there's a huge variety based on community needs. Miami made the decision because they have so many children that are not graduating from high school. And they looked into the research and said, what is the greatest impact on high school graduation rates? And it's third grade reading skills. So now that's why they've revamped, and their entire focus is on reading by third grade. So it's really just doing that initial needs assessment for your community and looking at the demographics of your community and saying what is our need that we most significantly need to grapple with, and then how do we direct resources to make sure that we're meeting that need.
So our goal may be to get kids to go to college. It may not be
Correct.
enhancing third grade. How is your office funded, speaking of that? Does each of these groups give a stipend or
Correct.
due to the national or to the state association?
Yes, we are a trade association, and it is set up on an equitable dues formula. If Wakulla County did it, it would be probably a couple $100s, to be honest, because St. Lucie, even, I think their annual is about $10,000, so it's a nominal fee, but it's enough. I operate with about a $500,000 budget, and it really is, those are the things that we fund, are keeping a lobbyist in Tallahassee to make sure major legislation does not impact us or the priorities that you all care about. We work on communication to make sure that there's a lot of products and deliverables to help with outreach to your community so they're aware of who this Children's Services Council is and what services you're providing. Do a lot of the data and trend analysis for you to be able to demonstrate these were the investments and this is where we've been able to make market improvements. And so yes, it is set up on an equitable dues structure. It's 0.013 of your ad valorem.
And it's paid for out of that separate millage, right?
Correct.
Does your office provide assistance with education for the community if this is on a referendum?
To an extent. Now, I work with each of the counties who are approaching referendum and talk about what their priorities are and help to create marketable deliverables and things. We're working right now, for example, St. Lucy's coming up on reauthorization in 2 years, and so we've started to work with them, and school age is one of their big interests. So we're getting ready to do some briefing documents on the significance of school age care and what it will really mean. But the line that the board drew was not to assist with polling, not to assist. I mean, there's some things that are just not part of our skill set or expertise that we have to defer to the community for what's important to your community. If you communicate with me on this is what's important to your community, then I'm able to help you and assist in that way.
But we would be able to, and I think it probably wouldn't even have to be you, but the communities that have passed this in the past, would they put the ballot language they used and the way they set it up as a reference?
Yes.
And take advantage of communities that invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in marketing campaigns and see what their product was, to word our ballot language we've already said before with it, and language we know is passed in other communities.
The only downside, of course, to all this is we got a 2020 committee referendum. We got, when's our 1 cent sales tax?
2014.
2014, that's coming up. We got one this year. This November.
I said this year, 2020 and 2014. I mean, and then 1 cent in 2 years.
That's the only negative, is that we got a couple more coming up. Of course, it's the voters decide, obviously, but.
Well, and the reason I wanted to have this workshop in large part was to educate y'all as an option, make sure our staff was aware of the option, and I want to thank, we have several members from our youth coalition here, to try and make sure they were aware of this as an option, and if they have any questions, feel free to signal, and I'll be glad to have one of y'all come up to the mic and ask questions. But I wouldn't want to even push it forward unless the community decided this was something they wanted. But I wanted to, it's something that's been discussed a little bit here in Wakulla, discussed a lot in Tallahassee. And if it, and at some point, I hope that it happens.
What's their take on it up there in Leon County? Why haven't they done this yet?
To be candid with you, it was the communications were not handled well. The first couple of runs, the outreach to the community was, Tallahassee is conservative enough. It was not shared with them from the standpoint of these are things that we can invest in our community that actually lessen the costs long term and the taxes that are necessary.
They did go to referendum, though.
No, it hasn't.
No, it hasn't.
Hasn't.
It's had a couple of stalls, and we're actually talking about it now. County Commissioner Brian Deloge works a lot on early learning issues, and so starting to regenerate that conversation. Monroe County is actually pursuing a Children's Services Council. As much fun as it is to visit Wakulla, having an excuse to go to the Keys was pretty fun. And then we also have Volusia County, Orange, Sarasota, and Lee that are also talking. So there's a lot more movement in this direction than we've had in previous years.
Well, and one of the things I think would happen if we were to pass it in Wakulla, I think that Leon County would probably quickly follow behind us. And the money that they would invest in children in Leon County would would trickle down to, not trickle down, but be more resources for children in our program. A lot of the organizations that work with youth in our community are regional organizations, and them having more money means the whole region has more money. At least that's one of my ideas. Commissioner Moore, do you have comments? Or are you leaning forward?
Actually, anything that you can do to help children, how can you not do it? But we have organizations who are doing everything that they can to help children, and we're funding those organizations. Funding one more organization is creating another level of government, another level of tax. That's just something that I'm not in favor of. We probably have enough trouble funding the ones that we have.
I will say that you've had some pretty big cuts from the state level in children's youth programming. We at the local level don't fund any, rec park, I guess we provide resources to the rec park. But beyond that, we don't put any resources towards youth program out of our local tax dollars.
Jerry, I agree with you. I wouldn't want to do the independent. That's what one way I would support is if it was on a referendum and the voters could decide if they wanted it or not. I would never say we're going to take a certain millage and we're going to dedicate it to
of course not. If this ever moves forward, it would be to let the community decide if it's something that they want, because they want to invest in youth in our community. Would not be us imposing it.
And if I may add, I think part of the difference here is, and I appreciate your concern, but it's not the creation of another organization that would be in competition with the youth programs. It's actually the partner that can provide the sufficient funding necessary to make sure that those youth initiatives are successful, so that the dollars that are in there, which often are lacking, that they have enough resources to actually make meaningful differences. So it's really just an expanded revenue to ensure that those programs are successful.
For example, the toy drive at Christmas, I mean, is that something the law would allow groups to contribute money to? They'll work hard to collect toys for underprivileged children. I didn't know if that was something, or is it more focused on programs? Not donations.
Traditionally more focused on programs, because the outcomes is what drives truly the community's willingness to invest, and their interest in investing is to be able to say, with these investments, you said college, we've gone from, making these up, but 75% of our high school students enrolling in college upon graduation to 85% because of the assistance we provided through X, Y, and Z programs. So you can actually track it and set it up so that you can see the benefits of the investments. Not to suggest that's not worthy, it's just a different framework.
Well, another question, with the committee able to set the millage, do you ever see much change in the millage in these communities? Or did most of them max it out?
There has been some changes during the economic downturn. We're starting to see it uptick back again. There was some changes in the lowest moments of the economy where, communities said we can't do this right now, but we're starting to see progress made back in the other direction, where communities are saying, actually, these are the investments we need to continue.
So there are some changes, but so they do change and fluctuate. It's not an automatic.
How are people saying that? You said people are saying, in what way are they saying it? That kind of goes back to my earlier question. How are they saying that? How are they saying we want you to lower your millage rate for children's services? Are they going to the meetings, or are they? Mm-hmm. So that's. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, these are public dollars, so public engagement certainly is critical. And as you asked before, everything is in the sunshine, and so there is a great opportunity for community input. I'm happy to share examples, Chairman mentioned it, of how the other referendum have been set up, but depending on your interests, you may even put in a stipulation that the community must participate in some way in the decisions on how the programs are set up. I mean, this is what you all would set up to pass if the community supports it. You can put in there the provisions you think are important to make sure.
And a third of the board is elected, not to the board, but as a superintendent, school board member, commissioner, and then with a governor having the influence to appoint people. The people who Governor Scott appoints are going to be different than the people who Governor Childs would appoint. So have different influences.
What are some of the major objections that people raise that might defeat a referendum, or at least lead to a lot of negative publicity going into it?
Yes,
And what are, well, no, I'd like to, what have other communities raised as objections or whatever? And then also, have you run into any problems with any of these existing programs for CSG?
No, that's a great question. And in all sincerity, I think what Mr. Moore suggested is probably the more common theme of what you hear. Is this just, another layer of government? Are we really creating something that's not necessary? I think that has been largely countered once you can look and provide examples of, if you look at the Children's Services Council Quick Facts in one of the documents I gave you, there's been significant impact by these communities, and these are just a few that we pulled this week to see, what is it that we want to share with you. The outcomes have really gone a long way to speaking for themselves. And so if you look at Miami-Dade, to me, while I know it seems an odd example given the size of the community, but one of the most conservative Republican communities that we have, and so we expected that there would be a lot of concern about it, but such a huge amount of voter support and community engagement with leadership. Mayor Pinellas was very helpful. Marco Rubio was very helpful. I mean, a lot of people came out and support. Jeb Bush was very helpful. And so there's been a lot of supportive people who understand this is an opportunity for communities to direct the investments with very little ask from their citizens in order to move these dollars forward. And so I think the education piece is the most important piece. Once people really understand what the benefits are and what it is and what it isn't, there's been very little pushback. Your second question on have there been challenges in any of the communities, the discussions that you all talked about, which you can set up and prevent in lessons learned, would be things like you brought up the salary. You know, that some of the communities have ended up, Palm Beach, someone said that our executive director down there has too high a salary. So that ended up in the paper. But those are all the things that are questions and, you know, speculatory and things that can be controlled when you set it up, how you set it up, and what you choose to address for your own community. But in general, no, there's been a huge amount. Watching a lot of the work down in Martin and St. Lucie, they're up. There's a new provision that says that all of the Children's Services Councils will go for reauthorization just to make sure their communities still want them. And they are the first two that are up in 2014, and they have had such good public outreach and such great opportunities to have the media actually saying, what can we do for you? These are worthy services, we want to help. So that's been one of the really nice things, is as much as it felt a little bit dreaded to go back to referendum, I think what the communities are realizing is this is a great opportunity to make sure everybody's aware of who we are and what we're doing.
Are we going to hear from citizens?
If there's any citizen who would like to ask a question, a thought,
or express
if you come to the mic or express an opinion, I welcome insight.
So loud you go sit down.
My name's Gail. I think that I commend you for bringing the workshop together. I really do. I think it's important that this board understand that there are programs in the county that have been at work for a very long period of time. But at the same time, I've got on my head right now, I'm reading the book Bridges Out of Poverty, and so I've got poverty on my head today. And yet, Jennifer at the Wakulla News is working on a listing of programs and opportunities for the summer for our kids, and we're way down on what those programs and opportunities are this year versus last year. So while I agree that there needs to be conversation about how Wakulla youth are supported in the community in Wakulla County, our school does a brilliant job, but even their programs over the summer have been cut. And the same way with Parks and Rec. We have nothing for Parks and Rec for the summer. So I commend that you're having the conversation, because it's time to have the conversation. Regardless of the structure or the support that makes it happen, you have committed to programs for youth by virtue of a community center. It's in how you manage that community center, I think, that will, or the results of that community center, what that community center means to the community, that may be the best carrot out there for further support. That's just kind of an off, I don't know if that made a bit of sense, what I just said, except that that you've made the commitment to do something a little bit, but it's not going to cost you any money. You've made that very clear. It's not going to cost the county any money. Well, what we're saying here is that there needs to be community step up, and the community steps up through this means or another means. I'm not speaking for the coalition now. I'm speaking for me individually, because this is a matter the whole coalition needs to hear. The Juvenile Welfare Board, though, has been around 40 years. That's why they've got they have good history. I know them. I know the people. I know people in every one of these other big urban centers, and so they are effective, because they need this strong, big infrastructure, because they are big urban centers, and they need to have the powerhouse to bring the community together. So again, I'll say, I think that looking at how you fund community programs and services for youth in the community, not school-based, but in the community, is an important conversation to have. And the learning from these others, what I would do if I were in your shoes, I'd go to every one of these places and ask them, I want to see, I'd make a phone call. Juvenile Welfare Board, I want to talk to your executive director. And find out, look at their websites. They do brilliant stuff, but they got mega tons of money, and they've got 40 years of history. So, and the other thing is, I want you to understand is that these children's services councils are not in competition with what's already existing in a community. In fact, the Hillsborough Coalition exists outside of the Juvenile Welfare Board. So they have community coalitions in those communities already who are going after dollars to support, just like we are, going after dollars to support school-based efforts and enforcement efforts and community-based efforts. So in those big urban centers, the Children's Services Councils are strengthened from the outside by those coalitions. So the Children's Services Council's not the do-all, end-all in those counties. They're also asking for resources outside of that, if that makes sense. Right? Would that be true?
Financial?
Yes.
Partnership.
Through partnership.
Yes. Most of the money is local tax dollars. There's very little other dollars there.
Does the Children's Services Council support the coalitions in those communities? Okay. But at any rate, I commend you for having the conversation, because I do think the time is right for the county to look at. It's great to have a community center and want to do right by children, but it takes money to do that. So, thank you.
Is there any other citizen input, thoughts?
Yeah, I wonder, if something like this were to proceed, would your organization like spearhead the effort to, you know what I mean? I think you know what I mean.
I do.
Would you work to help
Pass it, yeah.
publicize, mobilize support to pass the referendum?
I would say, that's a decision that would have to be made by the full coalition, and I can't speak for the full coalition.
And as the coalition as a 501c3 has limitations to what it can do.
Yeah, we cannot lobby, we cannot,
But education you can do.
But we can educate. Yeah, we can educate.
I think you understand what I'm, politics, that if something like this were to come from the board, people would probably vote against it just out of spite, even if, you know what I'm saying? That's true. And then they'll say, well, there's a tax coming from the board. No, but, if it was something...
Certain community leaders would be more persuasive, like if the school superintendent supported it, if the local physicians, if the Coalition for Youth supported it.
If the advisory council to the community center got behind it. They're an independent body. There's your powerhouse right there. And
that was my point.
Yeah.
Well, let me go forward. I heard what you said. My position is that I'm going to do everything I can possibly do to promote programs that benefit the maximum number of kids, and I'm going to do that hopefully through sports. I know that there's 16 different programs for every kind of problem that children may have, but I'm not going to support. We've got some referendums coming up and whatever, but when we go to a referendum, from my standpoint, that has anything to do with supporting kids, my focus is going to be strictly on rec and sports for the greatest number of kids, exclusively. I just would not support this over what I perceive to be something that would benefit more children. And
well, this money can go towards subsidizing the rec. Like right now, we've raised rec park prices so it costs more, and we've cut our direct funding to the rec park. This could help fill in that gap so that rec park became affordable for people.
But only a portion of it could be.
You could take all of it and put it towards it. You could take the entire $500,000. The committee could get together and say, "This is what we want to do." Spend it on flag football.
If you,
and it's done. Or you could spend it all on fishing.
Can you build facilities with that money?
My first question was, can you do capital? She said yes.
If you can, I'll do anything. Now, I hadn't supported a tax of any kind so far, and
That's true.
but if you can build sports facilities, bring us a world-class state of Florida class sports facility, then I'll support it. But I'm not going to support you giving 25% to the sports and 65% to...
No, I will say, Commissioner, the trick with this is you get a committee of people. Then it's not us, it's a committee of 10 people who decide how the money's being spent in the community, and then they decide how they're going to allocate the funds. Your job as either the commissioner that's appointed to the committee, you can influence it that way, and if you want the commissioner appointed to the committee as a citizen commissioner, come to the committee and say, I think we need to take this money and spend it on sports. I think that's the best investment we can make in our community. Without this, we won't have the money to do that.
If I didn't know that it was all going to the greatest number of kids and to capital improvements, then basically I wouldn't vote for it.
Okay.
Now, it may not be within the system of the way we do things to be able to do it that way.
Yeah.
But from whatever purpose, my go forward from my standpoint is to benefit, do everything I can for the maximum number of children, and basically the way you do it is through a capital project where you develop ball fields, and I've been where there's ball fields, and they bring huge numbers. They keep your kids busy. Right now, we don't have, don't have adequate facilities.
And Commissioner Moore, another thought, and again, we're not pushing this forward tonight, we're just sort of talking and brainstorming. But if you say you took 20% of it and put it towards rec park sports, that'd be $100,000 a year. You could borrow that money out, build the rec parks you want. Like that, even that's a lot of money spent on capital improvements we aren't spending right now, and you could still be spending other money on after-school programs, tutoring kids, or arts programs, so kids like me who weren't all that athletic.
Well, maybe at some point in time you'll have a child who would be athletic.
Well, and Jerry.
I don't know if Jerry's point he's trying to make is that he wouldn't want to see all the money go, for example, to subsidizing
That's exactly
lower income families.
I didn't say that. I don't want to get into
He doesn't want to see it going towards child care.
Whatever, you know what, I understand what he's saying.
Well, I'm just saying that, not saying this, I'm saying that this would give you more of an opportunity to do that than we're going to have any other way, as far as I see in the future.
Well, that's fine, as long as I can see where the money's going.
Yeah.
No, I think you were waiting longer.
The only thing that we can talk about all this other stuff if we want to. You made the point was that a committee's going to have to decide where the money goes. I guess what I want to make sure that we are conscious of up here as a board, if I had my druthers, this would be ahead of the 2020 plan to get on the ballot, because I think this is more important than the 2020 plan.
I agree.
I'm always in favor of a tax that the people vote on, that we don't sit up here and legislate, that the people get to vote on, and then I think it's okay then to have a worthy committee. I think this is the way to make up that committee to figure out how to spend that money, because you encompass the whole community. And we keep talking about the community center, but that community center only serves a select few of people who are going to live right in this Crawfordville area, and that's who's going to go to that community center. People in Buckhorn or Sock Choppy or Smiths Creek or Wakulla Station are going to have a hard time getting their kids to a community center, and we need to think holistically about the county, like you were suggesting, Jerry. But I think as a board, we need, if we're going to prioritize something to get on the agenda, I don't think they should be competing with one another on the same ballot. I think you said that, Randy. But that one at a time ought to come, so we got to decide.
When I invited the chamber here, I did not stress it to them as much as I invited, I did stress it to the Children's Coalition, the Youth Coalition, to come out more than I stressed it to the chamber.
I'm just saying the board needs to decide how important, which one's more important. In my mind, the children are more important. I would love to see us be able to levy this nickel, whatever it is, per thousand, or 0.5 on 1,000, 50 cent, whatever it is far more important to me than the 2020 plan, because I think we need that, because we heard that we don't have the money to pay for these other resources to reach kids. So I think it's a wonderful idea. I'd love to see it happen. I'd love to see this take priority over the 2020 plan, and the 2020 come another year. But don't let them compete on the same ballot, because I think we're doing a misjustice to both of them if we let them compete on the same plan. I mean, the same ballot.
I agree. We need to have we all need to have a serious conversation about what he just said.
I agree.
Well, I basically agree with everything, except I don't I wouldn't have a problem with having both on the same ballot.
You'd never get either one of them passed.
You might not, well,
I don't know, I think people would vote for
you
one
might,
and not
Lynn,
another.
but I think you run the risk of overloading people.
Yes.
Especially in today's economic times with the idea of taxes, and they're going to, and it comes from the board. I mean, we're going to legislate how that's written, and it's going to come from the board, and they're going to say, well, that's just like Randy suggested, it's just another tax, they're going to vote against it. I think if it was sold to the community and we're all out here pushing for something to levy for the kids, we can all get behind that. The 2020 plan is going to be another matter. I'm going to push for that too, but I think it has to be separate. I can't do both.
I totally agree with you.
What really scares me, if I could, is not so much the 2020, but 2 years later, the 1 cent sales tax comes up, which pays for the rec park, which pays for capital improvements, which pays for roads. If we lose that,
We're up the creek.
we don't have the 2020 money right now. So if we don't get it, we haven't lost it.
Then we're going to
If
sit up
we
here and
lose-
legislate to go to 10 mills, 10 mil cap. No commissioners want to have to do that, and that's where we'll be.
That 1 cent sales tax is absolutely critical, and I'm just afraid, like Mike said, even if both pass, okay? Even if both pass, 2 years later, I don't think, or whenever it comes up, a year later, then they're gonna see, what's this 1 cent sales tax again? You remember when I made the motion tonight to extend the gas tax? Nobody was gonna second it there for a second. And this is us, this is an existing tax. But you know what I'm saying, that's just the thinking, everybody's anti-tax, even us included, so that's what scares me.
I hadn't heard anybody say anything good about tax. All you got to do is mention the word tax, and it's. But Mike, you're right on your 2020. If I don't think it'd be wise to take two of these things. Of course, we're not taking it. We allow the citizens the right to make the choice. The citizens will make a choice for children. I truly believe they would make a choice for children. They're not going to be so happy in making that same choice for roads and bridges. It's just about everybody's got a kid or a grandkid. And in supporting that, if we can determine where the money's going, or somehow, I may not even support it. If I can't get my way, that's funny. If I can't get my way or my position with enough of that money going to rec programs for the maximum number of kids, then I probably wouldn't.
And I don't... Yeah, sorry.
I like this because there's a needs assessment, so you're identifying priorities in the community. There is accountability to make sure that you're seeing the benefits or the effects that you want to see. There are any number of things that we could use it toward, and I think our major issue is going to be that we only have $500,000 to allocate to the many things that really need funding or more funding. So, I'm on board. I'd like to see it on the referendum for this coming November. And
Can you not borrow against this money?
Can you leverage it?
Bond it, right?
I would have to look into that. I don't know the answer.
Well, if you would think if it's a
It'll be all
half.
according to your sunset, what you sunset it at.
Right.
That's true.
There's what
You can only let it out to wherever it sunsets.
That's right.
Yeah, well, then you can leverage out to the sunset.
That's right, leverage out to the sunset.
Yes.
Maybe.
And
Maybe.
maybe.
Can you check on that for us, Heather?
I just read it.
I'm sure you didn't. I know. No worries.
There was another just a side note on this. There was talking about, Ms. Arts was saying, the various, you do it and you figure out who gets what and whatever. There was a little county that had a $2 million grant. Well, they had $2 million off grants to spend, and the grant people came to town, and the town wanted $40 million worth of programs. That was sort of a joke. They by the time everybody got through, the $2 million had gone to a $40 million request. But this is, I've been waiting for something to come forward that I can get involved for kids. I think if you're over 55 or whatever, your time is gone. You're living on borrowed time.
Yeah, well, I mean, and there's a lot of, well, I mean,
You resemble that?
I resemble that.
So do I. I resemble it more than you do,
Senior
probably.
center folks said that. But I would like to see it, I would like to see this on the November ballot. And I would personally do what I could to persuade voters to support it. Now, I'm not uncomfortable having the 2020 on there also. I'd rather have, if the 2020 is going to be on a ballot, I'd rather have it be this year than also when the 1 cent one is coming up. But if you, I mean, I feel like we made some commitments, but if we didn't, I'll go along with what the rest of you want to do.
I think that's why I made that point. I think that's where we as the legislative body here locally have got to decide when do we want to go on this ballot. I'm not going to put but one.
we
do the,
Jennifer's
but
over
I'm
there.
for putting this one.
Jennifer's writing down everything.
Writing like mad now.
Just to, just so you're aware, this is our local news reporter, diligently taking notes.
Now you tell me.
Can we check your notes before you leave?
On freedom of the press, Kerry. Now, like 2 points I'd like to make. I really like the idea that it's a separate millage. Jennifer writes on the front page, county millage rate at 8.75. She doesn't write water management district millage rate at whatever, you know. It's a separate millage. It's not attached to the county.
Doesn't even talk about the school board millage rate.
Right, yeah. Who cares what the school board millage rate? Nobody cares about that. They care about what
They
else.
should, I know.
Second highest.
So if it's for kids, if it's for kids, people don't seem to mind paying for it. And, you know, one of the first 1 or 2 meetings I was here, I always said, I don't think people mind paying for things if they think they're getting their money's worth.
Well, I don't think in this coming election in November, getting the majority of the people to vote for any tax is going to be extremely difficult. Getting them to vote for 2 is going to be impossible, in my opinion.
I'd rather see them vote, I'd rather let the citizens vote on this, not let, you know what I mean? I'd rather see them voting on this. I had some conversations with David. I think the 2020 committee concept itself is a good idea, but maybe via the CRA, they could be in charge of that money
Totally agree with you.
instead of
Totally agree
having a
with
separate
you.
tax. When
Yes.
we do the CRA, somebody's going to need to do that, and it's really governed towards Crawfordville, is what they're really shooting for.
And the share, just my view on this, I think that either of these taxes that we're discussing that are citizen-led initiatives need to have citizen backing. If the 2020 has a group of people behind it and this doesn't have a group of people behind it, then I think we go with 2020. I would like to see people from the community come up and say, or somebody, if it's us and we want to take the lead on it, we can be that group of people. But we need somebody who's pushing this agenda item forward so that it's being supported in the community. And right now, I mean, a lot of people are just hearing about this for the first time. I know many of you have only had this for a couple weeks.
I heard.
But Alan, I'm not going to agree to put both of them on the ballot in the same year.
I agree with you, Mike.
Let's do one or the other, and I think this one should take priority.
Okay.
And if
I agree with
what's
that.
How soon do we need to do this? I mean, there's a timeline you got to follow, I'm sure, to get it on the ballot.
Well, I'd have to first of all review Part 5 of Chapter 125 to see if there are any internal timelines in there for the Children's Services Council. From a ballot perspective, this board would have to adopt an ordinance for either of them setting ballot language. And to make it onto the November ballot, you would need to do that sometime before the end of August.
And to get on the August ballot, you have to do it sometime before the end of June.
Have you ever went to
There
one
are
of
2
those
ballots
workshops
coming up.
and had them people, could you actually convince people to consider a referendum the first time they met you?
The first time they met me.
Well, I'm pretty still new.
I am very new. I've been here less than a year, but the decision, let me tell you what I think would be the strength and what my recommendation would be for next steps. You all having this rich discussion is amazing for the community. Often it's the other. It's the stakeholders, the people who are doing the work, already serving children, that come together and say, gosh, how do we take it to our county commissioners and get their buy-in? So the fact that this is happening in this order is actually pretty wonderful. The next step that I would recommend would be, and if they're still willing, setting up a meeting where I can sit with the community partners that they identify, that you all identify as the leads on youth initiatives, so that we could talk about what programs and services are out there, what would be, the intended purpose of this, so that when you have the language, you do get what you were talking about, the buy-in and the support, and see if we can make headway with it coming from the people who would do the services, ultimately.
I can see that you would need a committee in a hurry. I would support a committee, but I'm going to support it when I see a percentage of that money. Whatever that committee, I don't care about how it works, but for me to support it, I want to see a percentage of the money that we may raise, if it's voted by, that percentage going to recreation for the maximum number.
And Jerry, we would do that as this sitting body, the way I understood her giving the presentation, when we write up whatever that ballot language is, that's when we'll decide how much goes towards whatever.
Just like the 1 cent sales tax.
And we'll decide that.
How much for roads.
But the first step is to get it on the three that we need to get on the ballot. I want us to agree here that we're going to do one or the other, but not both. That's where I'm at. And I've heard you say that's where you're at.
I don't think you could ever get two, and in my agenda is to do for kids, and I don't think you can get two. I would support one, and I would support this one.
I think we need to handle this carefully, though, with the 2020 committee.
This has been working for a year.
Citizens Initiative. I think if they were to handle possibly the monies from the CRA, now, of course, you don't need South Choppy and, you know what I'm saying, involved in that. I think the community center people would be probably an excellent group for you to reach out to right away, because they've already been assembled, and they contain all these people you're talking about. But back to that 2020 thing, I agree. I think this is a much higher priority than the half cent sales tax in 2020. I'd 100 times rather have this and the 1 cent sales tax than this and the 2020. And then the 1 cent sales tax fails, because that pays for a lot of capital improvements we have. And, we can use the 1 cent sales tax for certain things. This half cent can only be used for roads, right? Is that correct?
The half cent can, yes.
It's roads, bridges, and there's also the ability under statute to use it for things such as mass transit.
But we could not use it to buy a cop car, which is what we use for 1 cent sales. We couldn't use it to buy ball fields, which is what we can use the 1 cent sales tax. That's what scares me to death, is that we're going to ask the citizens to pay for too much.
Yeah,
And it's going to be for a very limited, that's purely a transportation sales tax.
We can make in a small decision like this, you could say it's a large decision, but you can make Wakulla County the premier place for families and children with something like this, a premier location for we already are, because of our school system, our safety department, our natural environment. But when you throw recreation into that and children, you can make it a premier location for families.
I take my 2 daughters to Truesdale up there, to gymnastics in Tallahassee twice a week. There's nowhere. And I'm not saying we're going to have that, but
well, you can have it.
Park, they got a pool, they got a gymnastics center, and there's tons and tons and tons of kids.
This should be the first step to getting there.
That's right. This is.
I encourage us, just as we, and I regret that there aren't representatives from the Chamber of Commerce here. I emailed it out.
Jennifer will tell.
I know. I emailed them out when I first proposed this and invited them to come out to the meeting. And actually, we do have a board member from the chamber here. Rachel's on the board. Just right late.
She the one frowning?
But we do. I would. A lot of work's been put into the 2020 committee. As you obviously, since I helped bring the workshop forward, I'm a fan of the Children's Services Council. I think that you have to have community buy-in, and before we do away with one, I want to make sure there's a group coming in behind to push this one forward. Just putting something on the ballot doesn't mean it's going to pass.
But we don't know we got community buy-in with the 2020 plan.
I don't think there's a reason for us to stop. If we want to move forward and start doing stuff with this to see how it works and develops, I think that's a great idea. I think we're going to have to make a decision sometime very soon. I think I think in this conversation, I agree with Commissioner Arts. I think citizens have the ability to say, I think this is a good idea, a bad idea, and look at two different taxes and know that they're two different things, versus say I'm for roads against children, or I'm for roads for children, or I'm...
I don't think that was the point, though, Alan.
You think having it's too much. People are going to view it as too much, and it's going to...
You're right. I think they could differentiate between the 2020 and the youth, but it's when you get to the half-cent sales tax for transportation, and then a year later, there's a 1-cent sales tax for transportation.
And that's your concern?
That's my concern.
Not this.
We just did a half-cent. I'm not going to vote this back in. I mean, we just funded something like that. Counties all crooks in, where they're stealing our money.
You're exactly right.
That's what I'm worried, not the competition between the two.
Okay, I understand your clarification.
And maybe it's just me, but I feel badly that some of these concerns weren't more strongly expressed when the chamber was asking for us to establish the committee, and I mean, we never gave them any hint that we wouldn't.
I didn't say that. I didn't say I was against the 2020. I stood here and said I'm for both of them, but I think we need, as a board, to prioritize which one goes on the ballot. If I'm outvoted and we decide that we want both on there, that's fine. I'm not going to vote to put both out. I think we ought to prioritize them. I think this one should take priority and put this one on this year instead of the next one the next year. Give the 2020 time to do what they got to do.
One of the things we're going to be doing is today we met and we're actually taking the CRA area or the town plan, and we're going to put numbers to it for over a 10-year period of what, if we did a CRA for Crawfordville, the Crawfordville CRA, what that would look like, because we want to present that to you guys as a possibility, as Randy was saying, as a possibility to an alternate funding for the 2020.
Yeah, but see, I think the 2020 committee is not suitable for the for a CRA.
Well, I'm just saying it becomes an alternative to that, to where it gives you some options.
And I understand what you're saying.
I just feel like
period of reflective thought. You know, you don't want to just tell the chamber, no, we don't want to do this.
The committee the 2020 committee, which is...
But I understand, trust me, I know what you're saying. Why didn't I stand up then and say, well, this tax then and then this tax later, I don't think they're going to pass. You're right, I should have said something.
If I'd had the choice, this is the first time. I was sitting here tonight thinking, no way. I'm not building any more government or whatever. But if I can get something for kids, then I'll give that philosophy out, because if I do nothing more than in my time here, if I do it for kids, then I'll be very happy regardless of everything else. But if I'd had the choice between 2020 and this, there wouldn't have been a choice. I think 2020 is very good. The people will make that ultimate decision. I don't think they...
I think the county attorney has a comment.
Oh, I just wanted to answer your earlier question about debt. And obviously I had to skim this very quickly sitting here, but 125.091 2B6 says that nothing in this paragraph shall be construed to authorize the district to issue bonds of any nature, nor shall a district have the power to require the imposition of any bond by the governing body of the county. And further up, in the authority for them to lease or buy real estate equipment and other personal property, it mentions that it basically has to be paid with cash on hand.
That's in item 6 of your handout, in case y'all didn't read it.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I ask a question about the putting referendum on the primary and the November?
You could put referendums on primary ballots.
So theoretically...
You can put each one on each ballot. But
You can put a referendum on a primary?
Mm-hmm. You can put it on, we could have done a referendum.
Only Republicans would be?
No, everybody can vote in the primary.
So we're not open?
Like when you got elected, it was just a primary ballot.
That was because there was no...
Right.
That might be the only thing you vote on is that thing.
Yeah. If you're a no party affiliation
That would be
person.
the only item on your ballot, that.
But
But
the-
not many Republicans are going to turn out because they know they don't have any.
But this year, the school board races, there's school board races, and those are nonpartisan, and they'll be decided by the primary ballot. So people who are concerned about voting for schools and school board will probably, not the superintendent race, but the school board races are nonpartisan, and it will be voted on the August ballot by everybody. So you might actually have an increased turnout for the August primary.
Well, I don't want to beat this to death, but the 2020 committee's original impetus, if you will, was 319 intersections, right?
Right.
And we told them to spread their scope out to make it more palatable to the voters. Originally, it was just supposed to be for 319. And I think the CRA, of course, the composition of the group would have to change, because Southside's got nothing to do with the CRA. You know what I'm saying?
Well, they can have their own.
But that was the original drive, was to get money to help fund these intersection improvements on 319. And they could refocus in on that with the CRA and not have to be a countywide
Yes.
thing. To me, I was thinking, I didn't say anything, but they were really starting to overlap with the 1 cent sales tax, and we were saying, you need to do other projects besides this or that. I think Jerry said build a park or a lift station or something like that. Jerry Moore lift station.
Remember
That was the pumping station.
You understand what I'm saying? It's hard, because originally it was just supposed to be what would be applicable to the CRA.
Right. I guess what I would like for some people to think through, rather than, since some of you are committed to just having one of these on the November ballot, if there's any way that people would be open to have one on the primary ballot and one on the November ballot. I would think that you would still have your concern
I'll
about
tell you
what
what I
do these
would-
mean for
I'll tell you what I would
2014.
be more than perfectly willing to do, but we can't do it, is have the 1 cent sales tax first. See, if that passes, then let's do the 2020 plan. I would go for that 100%, because
I totally
That
agree with
1
you.
cent
When do
sales tax
you-
is-
when do you think you're going to do that, though?
We can't do the 1 cent sales tax.
Oh, we could do the 1 cent sales tax.
Well, you're not ready to do it.
Yeah,
we're not
we're
ready
planning to do it 2014, but we could put it on the ballot for this fall.
no, I don't want to change the whole direction of our county workshop, but you understand, Miss Arts, what I'm saying? That the citizens will still be able to decide, but they
Your concern isn't that it's the two tax issues and that the people will vote no on both. Your concern is the half-cent sales tax will make passing or failing will stop the 1 cent sales tax from passing or fail. Will make it fail.
I think if the
So it's the
House-
the half-cent sales tax is his concern in any way, in any capacity, with or without this, correct?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
It's the half-cent.
Yeah, I think I understand what Randy's concerns are.
Okay, I apologize.
No, I think I understand your main priority is making sure that the 1 cent
That's
sales
exactly
sales tax passes.
We have to have that.
Yeah,
We
you
do not have to have this half cent. That's what I'm saying.
And I think we might have verged off a little, and I don't, with our workshop, but I think are we just staying on message so that we don't get ourselves into too much frustration. Are there other comments about this from the board? Any other comments from the community? Last thoughts?
Speak now, if everyone would speak.
I think
But
you
where
can.
are we,
Miss,
Would
you come up to the microphone?
Yes.
Thank you.
With the proposed visit to the Community Coalition, I would love it if you guys could come to that meeting as well. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask that, but it isn't appropriate.
we can't all be there.
All
We
right.
could make it Miss Arts, I would say, would be the most
Well, we
I
can
don't know
make
what
it,
meeting you're talking about.
the Youth Coalition meeting, we could make it so that it was a workshop, so that we're there for that part of it. But I know Commissioner Stewart works, all of the different commitments during the day. It's hard for Commissioner Stewart to leave the school.
If we had to appoint, personally,
Commissioner
I'd like
Arts
to
is-
see Miss Arts. I would trust her judgment on this personally.
And Ms. Arts does come to the meetings. My only reason for even entertaining it is that, there are some 30 agencies and providers that sit around that table, and we have Stacy Harvey here, and she's with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and so her questions are very different than any that have been raised or discussed tonight with you guys. And, you know, her issue is going to be, look, I am working with the school, I have a memorandum of agreement, I don't want to be in I don't want you to put a football field in because my big brother's, big sister's program is not important to you. So they will have real where the rubber meets the road questions and concerns. And so that, it's fine. Ms. Arts will convey all that.
And towards that effect, and Commissioner Moore and I may end up, disagreeing once again when it comes to these things. I would not want to see the majority of this money, the 80% and 90% of it, put towards the rec park. I think putting some of it towards rec park is a wise investment. I think that as we've decreased our investment in the rec park, we've had a reduction in our budget. We've lowered revenue, so we aren't investing as much in the rec park, and we've increased fees. And there's a lot of children who can't afford to do rec park sports right now. Right. And I think helping offset that would be a great thing. But taking $500,000 annually to build a pool every year, I don't know that's the best use of this. When we could, I know that using Stacy as an example, our goal is to raise $20,000 a year for Big Brothers Big Sisters so that we can have a mentorship program. And I very actively help raise money for Big Brothers Big Sisters, and we've gotten 2/3 of the way there a couple years in a row, but we yet to actually get to the full $20,000 to fully fund the program from Wakulla County. We get resources from Leon County.
But we just take a
that's one
percentage.
example.
You just look at the percentage, and I never said 90.
You said
I would like all of it.
You said all of it.
But actually, I did not say 90, but I won't.
Well, I would like to talk about next steps a little bit. It sounds like you're going to meet with the Wakulla County Coalition for Youth, and when the advisory committee or group for the community center is established, we need to have, I think, some conversation between you and them also. But in terms of us, what are we doing? I mean, are we...
I think somebody needs to go talk to the chamber. I guess if they're spearheading this issue, I'll go talk to them. I mean, I'll take the punch in the nose. Just say, look...
You'll get one.
Well, that's fine. Look, guys, we talked about it, and that I think the youth's more of a priority. I'll talk to Shuff. He's the guy to talk to, I guess. And maybe we could Shuff. And just say maybe there's another mechanism for y'all's vision to realize, but maybe it's not this. Maybe it's a referendum after the 1-cent sales tax, 2 or 3 years from now. I would be perfectly supportive of that.
Okay, do we need to have some agenda item coming back to the board related to either ballot language for this or ballot or postponing Wakulla 2020? What do we need to do?
It won't be at Monday's meeting. It would be at our first meeting in May, whatever we did.
But if I go talk to those people, I mean, y'all are behind me on this, right? I don't want to say, well, idiot. Why did he tell you that?
I don't like it.
Right?
I told you what I said.
Okay.
I stand by my word. You know that.
Again, I want to reiterate, I think we should go whichever one has. I'm not against having both on the ballot, and I think if you have, I am waffling. I'm being very, I will restate, I'm not against having both on the ballot. To have either of them on the ballot, I think there needs to be community support or organization pushing the agenda item forward. Right now, you have 2020 doing that. We do not have a citizens group pushing this forward yet.
Would it be a fair
and that makes me
statement?
hesitant to get rid of this one.
Would it be a fair statement to say then that the majority of the board is against having both on the ballot at this time?
Yes, I think that is a fair statement.
Okay.
And I think this is probably a decision with, we'll call it 2020, everything you probably want to have at a regular meeting so they interested groups would have an opportunity to have their say on that issue as
Well, I
well.
at least want to talk to John and personally.
I agree. And I agree with Heather that we're going to hear it from that group, I'm sure.
And I'll probably give a phone call to John myself just to...
He's probably on his driving down here right now.
That's not on cable right now. The words we...
There may be a way to their goal with a different mechanism.
Yeah.
And the CRA may be the perfect mechanism to do it.
I think we have one last citizen comment.
While I am on the Chamber Board of Directors, I do not want to speak for the Chamber. I want to speak purely as a private citizen and to express concern that the method for gaining citizen input on referendums seems to be a little bit limited. And I know our county attorney just suggested that we have such a discussion in a regular meeting, and I wonder, however, if discussing possible alternatives, for instance, several of you have mentioned different alternatives for achieving the goals and objectives of Wakulla 2020 without having to have it be a referendum on the ballot. There's more than one way to accomplish those goals over time. But is it possible to have a workshop specifically on ballot referendums, since there seem to be 3 different possible ballot initiatives on the table, because you've all discussed a sales tax, the half penny or 1 cent, you've confused me now about which is which, and the CSC as well as the Wakulla 2020, because I hear
Wakulla 2020 is a sales tax.
but there was another sales tax in addition to that.
That's about
That's
2 years.
2 years.
2 years.
Yes.
It's a renewal of one that's already in place that currently funds. Our road department provides public safety vehicles.
Okay, like Tallahassee's Blueprint 2000, sort of.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Or-
well,
No.
the 2020 is
More like
that?
Blueprint
more like
2000.
that.
Okay, I really have been trying to follow what you all are doing on this, and I have to say that if I'm confused, probably a lot of the electorate in Wakulla is confused. But
Well,
will there be
suggestion's a
additional?
good one, but this group tends to not like workshops.
Well, you're talking
I
about
like this kind of workshop. Anything for kids, I love.
Well, here's the thing, commissioners. I hear you saying that you want to go approach the chamber and talk to them about this and try to get their buy-in. And you've talked about the meeting of the Youth Coalition and what they're going to come up with. And I know that you also want to speak to next steps. I would like to see citizens have more opportunity to talk about what they might want to see in the county before we say we're going to give them a limited choice in terms of a ballot referendum, because yes, we have elected you to represent us, but I am concerned about a paternalistic tone in terms of deciding what direction you all want things to go in, and I would like citizens to have more input to this.
I totally agree with you, and based on what I've been driving at, I can make 20 calls tonight and I can have 500 people giving us their opinion on, you're talking about citizen input.
Let's reserve a bigger room.
I can't get 5, could the newspaper reporter just step out? There's somebody wanting to talk to you out there. Anyway.
Everything you say is also on YouTube, every one of our meetings, Chair.
Thank you. I can't get that many people supporting 2020. But the position I'm talking about, I can have 500 people here and next week supporting that. There's just that many people who are that much involved in taking care of their kids.
I wouldn't say paternalistic, but not many, most people don't know the ins and outs of what this sales tax is for and what that sales tax is for. They say tax. Well, here's a half-cent tax and here's a 1 cent tax. They don't know that this tax can't pay for an ambulance and this tax can pay for an ambulance. And I think that's our responsibility is to
Raise awareness.
well, not necessarily raise. I mean, we're not a pure democracy. We don't. Everything's not. Every decision. Is not
You're a
voted on.
representative democracy.
Representative. That's correct. But we're not pure democracy.
Right.
We vote on everything. So I think it's our responsibility to do those things. Is to decide, based on our knowledge, which we're supposed to have, which one we think is more important. If it's paternalistic, then.
Okay.
I appreciate the good intentions of the commissioners. Absolutely.
Do you think that, and I'll open this up to the commission, and we can have it come back with the minutes, do you want to have another workshop on this subject in May, where we get more people here and have a conversation and see if the community ups well? Or do you want, and you can have...
I don't want to pit this group against
that group.
That's what I'm worried about.
And they'll say, well, we want to be on the referendum. Well, no, we want to be on the referendum, not you. We're more important than you are. But let me have a talk
Okay.
first, if you don't mind. And I really think we all agree about the CRA, I think, going forward.
I think we've all been,
The town plan.
the majority of the board's been supportive of the CRA for a long time.
That, maybe that accomplishes the goal without having to ask citizens to put another tax on it.
Hopefully we'll have a number on that, actually put a real dollar value on that.
And I wouldn't mind giving the total control of that CRA over to some sort of 2020 committee or whatever, so we're not involved in it.
Just turn the CRA over to the committee that we have in place.
No, the committee that we've established for Wakulla 2020, I respectfully disagree. I do not think they would be suitable for a CRA for Crawfordville.
Let me go back to what I said earlier, is that the original intent was for, the only reason the committee is structured the way it is today is because we wanted it that way, because we wanted it to be countywide. If it was shrunk back down to what I think the original intent of that group was, I understand what you're saying. Not the same committee for the CRA, no.
And if the 2020 moves forward, I also think the 2020 would do more than just make improvements to Crawford Highway. I think you'd see improvements throughout the whole county the way it's set up currently. Ms. Birkin, do you have any?
I was going to address and really, the science behind this. I respect all of the discussion and do want to say I think it's a very salient point not to pit these against one another and really to make sure that communications with the chamber, that they understand there's an opportunity here, and if there is an opportunity to continue the other work, that it coming down to a choice between the two. I mean, the Children's Services Councils work very closely with the local chambers, and it's important that they do and have that relationship. And so I appreciate the dialogue and would encourage you all to think through that. The other thing I just wanted to say about the next steps, and I really do look forward to meeting with the coalition and we can talk about the plan moving forward and how we could move forward swiftly, is though to say, as much as I appreciate the dialogue about how the money would be spent, that my strong recommendation would be going back to the beginning of my presentation, which is the decisions are based on a needs assessment, and that needs assessment has not yet been conducted. So what really we want to accomplish is it the will of this community to invest these dollars in children once you have it set up. And so that's the discussion that I would want to facilitate with the community partners, and not getting necessarily into this versus that. The community needs will come forward unless you want a very prescriptive referendum, which I think makes it more challenging to market, to be candid.
One last question, sorry, Heather or David. Could we have the 1 cent and the half cent on the same referendum?
Yes.
Where citizens could say, this 1 cent is for countywide projects, parks, capital improvements, blah, blah, blah. Do you want it, yes or no? This half cent is strictly for transportation improvements. I don't think I necessarily have a problem with that.
You can have them on the same ballot, but they can't be set up as alternatives. Like, do you want this one or this one?
No, I'm saying
they have to each stand on their own.
Both there, then citizens can decide, well, I'll like this and not that, or, I want whatever.
I wouldn't be for that, because they're going to be competing against each other, because I know the average citizen out there, like Rachel was suggesting, they don't understand. I don't care how much we try to educate them. We have one newspaper to do it in. You run the risk of those being competing with one another. And anyway, I'm scared to death of that, because I know how we became I won't even go there. But anyway, it's just, we need to be careful.
Maybe we need to have, I know there have been meetings with John Sewell and working on the CRA. Maybe we need a meeting or a workshop focused on CRA 2020 and see whether that's...
Let me make initial contact, first contact. And I think that may be the path to go down, what we talked about.
If he survives, we'll go forward.
I'd even support that workshop, Ms.
Are there any additional steps that you want to have us ask staff to set up to bring back? Do you want to wait until we bring it back?
Let me talk to John.
Okay.
And I'd like to hear the numbers on this CRA.
When are you going to report back to us?
Well, I think we need...
Take it out of the hospital.
Discussion item Monday night.
Because I talked to John for a good little while today, so I'd like to leave you and John, let's talk. So.
Which John are you talking about? John.
And I talked to John Sewell this afternoon.
Okay. Any other comments? Sorry?
Okay, after the meeting with the Coalition for Youth and the Community Center Advisory Committee, then what are the next steps for there? This possibly an agenda item? Where do we go from there?
Well, I think we're dealing with timelines, our own internal timelines. I would ask the county attorney to double check to make sure if there's any additional timelines that we should be aware of in the statute.
I'll definitely do that. I mean, the earliest this committee would, or this special district would be able to function would be not this next fiscal year, it'd be the fiscal year after that. Because you're not going to even know if they have any money. They can't do a budget when they don't have taxing authority till November. So you're looking,
Do we need to,
put it on the referendum for this November, no tax would be levied until the following year. So,
Planning period.
yeah.
so there'd be, okay.
So you've got long lead times.
Should this be coming forward then from the Coalition for Youth and the Community Center Advisory Committee, or can we have an item come directing staff to move forward on ballot language, just so that we get something that by August? What your recommendation is?
You're going to help us through this whole ballot language issue. And
Certainly, I will provide technical support, and my recommendation would be the meeting first. If those stakeholders who work directly on behalf of youth in the community say, yes, we support this and we want to move forward, then I think we can start working on the referendum language. That's going to be your first litmus test of if there's agreement, yes, and then also we can start planning and divvying out work of who's going to do what and how are we going to accomplish this. In the meantime, I'm happy to start collecting other examples of referendum that I can provide, and you all can start working through what that might look like.
Well, I guess I have a question there. When do we start putting the stakeholders together? We don't just...
There'll be another youth coalition meeting.
Well, we're
There's
saying
going to be a
this,
lot more people than just the youth coalition.
Community Center group.
well, there's the Coalition for Youth, which has 30-some members, and then there's the Community Center Advisory Council, which has 11 members. And who are you envisioning as stakeholders that aren't represented by
I would
those?
say the Board of Education.
Well, but they're on both of them.
Okay. The rec department, they're on both of them. Who's going to be representing the youth? Well, I know we've got the youth coalition.
Coalition for Youth.
But who's going to be representing the sports end of the system, the ball players and the...
Your advisory council has the sports, a representative from sports. I don't know who they are because I've not seen the names, but they'll be represented. And then there are 4 teens who have been identified as community leaders, young leaders for the coalition, and we'll work to have them in that meeting as well. Just to
Basically, Ms. Arts, on your community center, I didn't support the community center. I probably don't support the community center. I'll only support it if it's not using taxpayer money. And if you start peeling off money from this initiative over into the community center, then that voids what I then all of a sudden we start using tax money for the community center.
I just want to reiterate that our community center, the property it's on, as it's being run by the Y, they're putting in a gym. There'll probably be potential for some of the things that you discussed, some of those world-class recreation.
It'll never happen at the community center. It's going to happen when you're going to have to build it.
Right. I mean, you have to build it, but there's 20 acres. How many acres is the community? 16 acres?
No,
22.
22 acres. I mean, there's only so many places you can build a world-class rec park in the county.
There's definitely...
But I'm not.
Then
I think
the
that would be awesome.
Now, the conceptual plan has included an Olympic-sized pool for regional competition and both USA swimming competition that would bring people from all over the Panhandle and southern Georgia and whatever. north central Florida. It's also, there's been talk about having a regulation soccer field there as well that could host.
2156 of the law.
Well, and I think we're starting to get off into the weeds a little bit. I think that if you have organizations that you think might be supportive of this idea, now that you've heard about it, I would reach out to them, tell them about it, and let them know about it. And it's going to be...
Well, I'm wondering if the recreation board, the recreation department director and the recreation board maybe should be invited to this coalition meeting.
Definitely.
Philip Boss. Is he? Huh?
I just wrote that name down. What I will do is send to Mr. Edwards a listing of folks that we think will have a conversation, and he'll run it by you guys so that we are inclusive, and we will make it as broad as we can possibly do given where we stand. And the coalition meets next on the first Wednesday in May, whatever that date is, and if we can keep it to that date, it's a better outcome because we are a group of habit. So, but is that okay?
As our
But we
chair,
might need I'm just thinking the rec board meets at night, and so I don't know if we need to...
Yeah, there's several good names that come to mind for the rec. Bubba Dempsey, Parrish Bar was active in it for years. Any of those guys, I know Philip's been around it a long time, but they want somebody more active.
And I think part of the challenge, if this moves forward and as we suggest names to the governor, people, as I didn't realize we actually suggested the names, but we can take some interest, if it passes, to suggest names from the rec park and from the different community, from the arts community, from the early childhood community that can help promote this and help make sure that their money's being spent in needs. And again, I think the needs survey is going to be influential.
It will be, absolutely. And the coalition's been a strong data folks group for years, but the coalition has also failed early childhood from birth to 5, or birth actually through 13 years old. So that's what this allows. The Children's Services Council is just total inclusion. But at any rate, I'll reach Mr. Edwards with all of this, and he'll communicate with you guys. If we can avoid a couple of meetings, it'd be great. Maybe
I do
call the
think
rec board, maybe they'd come to a day meeting.
I do think time is going to be our biggest challenge as all this moves forward. I appreciate everybody coming out today.
Good workshop, Alan.
I'm glad y'all enjoyed it. It went better than I expected.
Jennifer got the story for like 3 weeks.
I have been trying to schedule the workshop for some time. Brittany, because the legislative session wasn't able to come much earlier this year.
Thank you for coming.
She can't wait to get back to y'all. I think we got us.